Our kind waitress allowed a homeless man to play the violin for food, unaware he was actually a millionaire in disguise, testing the kindness of those around him. Don't let this be our last meeting. Subscribe, like, and comment now. The algorithm is unforgiving. Let's dive into the story. The lunch rush at Bella's Bistro was relentless as always. Emma Rodriguez wiped sweat from her forehead as she balanced 3 plates on her left arm and grabbed 2 glasses with her right hand. Her feet ached in the worn sneakers she'd had for 2 years, but she smiled anyway as she approached table 7. Here we have the grilled salmon, the Caesar salad, and the mushroom risotto, she announced cheerfully, setting down each plate with practiced precision. Can I get you anything else? The business executives barely looked up from their phones as they mumbled their thanks. Emma had grown used to being invisible to most customers, just another face in their busy lives. At 22, she'd been working at Bella's for 3 years, saving every penny she could while putting herself through night school. The tips weren't much, but it was honest work and she took pride in doing it well. As she turned to clear table 4, a commotion outside caught her attention. Through the large windows facing the street, she could see a small crowd gathering around someone on the sidewalk. Her heart clenched when she spotted a frail-looking man in tattered clothes, holding what appeared to be a violin case. "Emma!" barked Mr. Rodriguez, no relation despite the shared last name, the restaurant's perpetually stressed manager. "Table 12 needs their check and the kitchen is backed up on appetizers. Move." "Yes, sir," Emma replied, but her eyes kept drifting to the man outside. He looked to be in his 30s, though the dirt and worn clothes made it hard to tell. What struck her most was the way he held himself. Despite his circumstances, there was something almost dignified about his posture. She delivered the check to table 12 and was heading to the kitchen when she noticed the man had moved closer to the restaurant's entrance. Through the glass door she could see him opening his violin case. His fingers moved over the instrument with surprising grace as he positioned it under his chin. The first notes that drifted through the door were hauntingly beautiful. Emma paused, a stack of menus in her hands, completely captivated. The melody was complex, classical, nothing like what she'd expect from a street performer. Several customers near the windows looked up from their meals, equally mesmerized. "Emma Rodriguez." Mr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the music like a knife. "What are you doing? We have customers waiting." She snapped back to attention and hurried to seat the party of 4 that had just entered. But even as she guided them to their table and handed out menus, part of her mind remained focused on the music floating in from outside. The violinist was incredibly talented. This wasn't amateur street performance. This was professional-level artistry. "Excuse me, miss." An elderly woman at table 3 raised her hand. "That music is absolutely beautiful. Do you know who's playing?" Emma glanced toward the entrance where the man continued his performance. A small crowd had gathered, but she noticed that while people stopped to listen, very few were dropping money into his case. "I'm not sure, ma'am. He's performing just outside." "Such talent," the woman murmured, shaking her head sadly. "In this economy, you never know someone's story." Those words resonated with Emma as she went about her duties. She'd been 1 paycheck away from homelessness more times than she cared to count. Her own story wasn't one most people would guess. A former honors student, whose family had lost everything in her father's medical bankruptcy, forcing her to abandon her college dreams and work full-time to support her sick mother. The lunch rush began to slow around 2 o'clock, and Emma finally had a moment to step outside during her break. The violinist was still there, though his audience had thinned. Up close she could see the fine lines around his green eyes and the way his dark hair, though unkempt, had good bones underneath the mess. His clothes were definitely worn and dirty, but something about him seemed off, like he was playing a part. "That was beautiful," she said softly as he lowered the violin. "I've never heard that piece before." He looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to actually speak to him. For a moment, their eyes met, and Emma felt an odd flutter in her chest. Despite his appearance, his gaze was intelligent, almost piercing. "It's Bach," he said, his voice rough but cultured. "Partita number 2 in D minor, not exactly top 40 material." Emma smiled. "Well, I think it's incredible. You're really talented." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe even suspicion. "Thank you," he said carefully. "Not many people stop to listen anymore. Their loss." Emma glanced back at the restaurant, knowing her break was almost over. Have you eaten today?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "I'm sorry?" "Food. When did you last have a real meal?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "It's been a while," he finally admitted. Emma made a decision that would change everything. "Wait here." She rushed back inside, her mind racing. Mr. Rodriguez was in the office doing paperwork, and the kitchen staff was cleaning up from lunch service. She quickly grabbed a to-go container and filled it with leftover salmon from an order that had been sent back for being overcooked. Nothing wrong with it except the customer's preference for well-done fish. "What are you doing?" asked Maria, the head cook, raising an eyebrow. "Just clearing out the leftovers," Emma said vaguely, adding a dinner roll and some vegetables to the container. She slipped back outside, container in hand. The violinist was packing up his instrument, and for a moment she worried he'd left. But he looked up as she approached, clearly confused. "Here," she said, offering the container. "It's salmon with rice pilaf and roasted vegetables. The customer wanted it more well done, but there's nothing wrong with it." He stared at the container, then at her, as if she'd just offered him something impossible. I can't pay for this." "I'm not asking you to. Sometimes we just need to look out for each other, you know?" Again, that studying look. Why? The simple question caught Emma off guard. Why was she doing this? She thought of her father, proud and hard-working until illness stripped away everything he'd built. She thought of her mother, too proud to ask for help, even when they needed it most. She thought of all the times she'd gone hungry so her mother could eat. "Because everyone deserves kindness," she said simply, "and because that music you played, it made people happy. That has value too." For the first time since she'd noticed him, the man's guarded expression softened completely. He looked almost vulnerable, younger somehow. "Thank you," he said, and she could hear genuine emotion in his voice. "You have no idea what this means." "Emma Rodriguez." The voice from inside the restaurant made her blood run cold. Mr. Rodriguez was standing in the doorway, his face red with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing? I was just giving away food to vagrants? Do you have any idea how much that meal costs? How much it costs me when you're out here playing social worker instead of doing your job?" Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment as other customers and passers-by turned to stare. "Mr. Rodriguez, please, I can explain." "No explanation needed. You're fired. Clean out your locker and get out." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. "But sir, I've worked here for 3 years. I've never missed a day, never been late. And now you're stealing food to give to bums. Pack your things. Now." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. She glanced at the violinist, who had gone very still, his eyes dark with something that looked almost like anger. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing for the scene or for the meal she'd given him that had cost her job. "Don't apologize," he said quietly, his voice completely different now, stronger, more controlled. "This isn't your fault." But Emma was already walking back into the restaurant, her world crumbling around her. She'd just lost the job she depended on to support herself and her mother, all because she'd tried to do something kind. As she cleaned out her locker with shaking hands, she could hear Mr. Rodriguez outside, loudly telling the violinist to move along before he called the police. The music that had been so beautiful 20 minutes ago was now silent. Emma gathered her few personal belongings, a spare pair of pantyhose, some lip balm, a photo of her and her mother, and walked toward the back exit. She couldn't bear to go through the dining room again, couldn't handle the stares and whispers. She was almost to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. "Wait!" Emma turned to find the violinist approaching, his violin case in one hand, the food container in the other. Up close, away from the restaurant and Mr. Rodriguez's shouting, she noticed details she'd missed before. His shoes, though scuffed, were expensive leather. His watch, partially hidden under a frayed sleeve, caught the light with the gleam of real gold. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his voice was completely different now, educated, confident, nothing like the rough tone he'd used earlier. "My name is David Sterling." The name meant nothing to Emma, but something in his tone suggested it should. "I don't understand," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. David looked around the parking lot, making sure they were alone. "I'm not homeless. I'm not. What I appear to be." Emma stared at him, confusion mixing with the pain of losing her job. "I don't understand what you're saying. I'm the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, I was. I was testing people, seeing how they'd treat someone they thought had nothing to offer them." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "But what you did, that wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to sacrifice something that mattered to you." The words sank in slowly, like stones dropping into still water. "You're rich." "Very." He met her eyes. "And I just cost you your job." Emma felt a surge of emotions she couldn't quite sort through. Anger, embarrassment, confusion. "So this was all some kind of game to you, some experiment?" "It started that way," David said quietly. "But not anymore." "Not anymore?" Emma's voice rose. "I just lost my job because I gave food to someone I thought needed it. And you're telling me you're some millionaire playing dress-up? I know how it sounds." "Do you?" Emma stepped closer, her fear and sadness transforming into fury. "Do you have any idea what that job meant to me? I have a sick mother. I have bills, I have—" She stopped herself, not owing this stranger any explanations, no matter who he claimed to be. David reached into his jacket, and Emma was startled to see he was wearing a very expensive suit jacket under the tattered outer layer. He pulled out a business card and held it out to her. "Sterling Enterprises, David Sterling, CEO." She read the card, then looked back up at his face. "This is really you?" "Yes." Emma stared at the card, then at David, then back at the card. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and with it came a depth of humiliation she'd never experienced. "So you watched me lose my job. You watched my boss humiliate me in front of everyone, and you could have stopped it. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't think." Emma's voice was steady now, cold. "You were too busy playing your little game to think about the real consequences for real people." She turned toward her car, but David stepped in front of her. "Please, let me fix this. Let me—" "Fix this?" Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't fix this. You can't give me back my dignity or my job or make this whole humiliating mess disappear. I can give you a better job. I don't want your pity or your guilt money." Emma's eyes flashed. "I want you to leave me alone." She moved around him toward her car, but his voice stopped her. "What if I told you I've been searching for someone like you for 3 years? Despite herself, Emma paused. "Someone like me?" "Someone genuine. Someone who does the right thing, even when it costs them something." David's voice was intense now, urgent. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Emma turned back to face him. "And what if I told you I don't care? What if I told you that your little test has probably cost me my apartment and my ability to take care of my mother?" The words hit David like a slap. She could see it in his face. The realization that his actions had real consequences for someone who couldn't afford them. "Then I'd say you have every right to hate me," he said quietly, "and I'd ask for a chance to make it right." Emma studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation she'd learned to recognize in her years of dealing with difficult customers and false promises. But what she saw instead was something that looked like genuine regret. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why were you testing people?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've been lied to, used, and betrayed by everyone I thought I could trust. Because I wanted to find someone who would be kind to a stranger without expecting anything in return." He paused. "Because I've forgotten what genuine goodness looks like, and I needed to remember it existed." The honesty in his voice caught Emma off guard. For the first time since Mr. Rodriguez had fired her, she felt something other than anger and fear. "And you found it by lying about who you are?" "I know how that sounds, but yes." David met her eyes. "I found it in you." Emma looked down at the business card still in her hand, then back up at this man who had turned her world upside down in the span of an hour. Everything about this situation was impossible, surreal. "I need to go," she said finally. "I need to figure out how to pay my rent and buy groceries and explain to my mother why I lost my job." "Emma, please." She held up a hand. I need time to think about all of this. David nodded, though she could see the reluctance in his expression. How can I reach you? Emma almost laughed. You're a CEO. I'm sure you can figure it out. She got into her car and drove away, leaving David Sterling standing in the parking lot of Bella's Bistro, still holding the container of food that had changed both their lives. As Emma drove home, her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Who was David Sterling, really? What kind of man had enough money to solve her problems, but chose to test people instead? And why did she feel like she'd just walked away from something that might have been important? But underneath all those questions was one truth she couldn't deny. In the space of an hour, a stranger had managed to see something in her that most people never noticed. He'd called her genuine, rare, good. Even if he'd lied about everything else, Emma found herself hoping that much at least had been true. Emma's apartment building was exactly what you'd expect for someone making minimum wage plus tips. 3 stories of faded brick with narrow hallways that smelled like cooking oil and old carpet. She climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, her legs heavy with exhaustion and defeat. The events at the restaurant felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. "Mija, you're home early," her mother, Carmen, called from the small living room as Emma pushed open the door. "How was work?" Emma paused in the entryway, looking at her mother settled in the worn recliner that had become her constant companion since the arthritis made walking difficult. Carmen Rodriguez had been beautiful once. Emma could see it in the bone structure, the expressive dark eyes that still sparkled with intelligence and warmth. But years of hard work, worry and illness had taken their toll. "Mom, we need to talk." Something in Emma's tone must have worried Carmen because she muted the television and gave her daughter her full attention. "What's wrong?" Emma sank into the threadbare sofa across from her mother and told her everything. The violinist, the food, getting fired, the revelation about David Sterling. Carmen listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to confusion to something that looked almost like pride. "So let me understand this," Carmen said when Emma finished. "You gave food to someone you thought was hungry, lost your job because of it, and then discovered the man is a millionaire who was testing people's character. That's about the size of it." Carmen was quiet for a moment, processing. "And this Sterling man, he offered you another job?" "I didn't let him finish his offer. I was too angry." Emma rubbed her temples where a headache was forming. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know we can't afford for me to lose this job. I know you're counting on me to—" "Emma Maria Rodriguez." Carmen's voice was sharp enough to cut through Emma's spiraling panic. "Look at me." Emma met her mother's eyes, expecting to see disappointment or worry. Instead, she saw something that looked suspiciously like fierce pride. "You did the right thing," Carmen said firmly. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. That's how I raised you, and I'm proud of you for not changing even when life has been hard." "But Mom, the rent—" "We'll figure out the rent, we always do." Carmen reached over and took Emma's hand. "But what we won't do is regret kindness. Your father would have done the same thing." Emma felt tears threatening again at the mention of her father. Roberto Rodriguez had been the kindest man she'd ever known, always ready to help a neighbor or give his last dollar to someone in need. It had been that generosity, combined with his medical bills, that had ultimately left them in their current situation. "I just don't understand why someone with that much money would pretend to be homeless," Emma said. "What kind of person does that?" "Maybe someone who's been hurt," Carmen suggested gently. "Rich people have problems too, Mija, just different ones." Emma pulled David's business card from her pocket and stared at it. The paper was expensive, thick stock with embossed lettering. Sterling Enterprises in elegant script with an address in the most expensive part of downtown. "I should probably look him up," Emma said. "Find out who I'm dealing with." Carmen gestured toward Emma's laptop on the small dining table. "Go ahead. I'm curious too." Emma opened her laptop and typed David Sterling Enterprises into the search engine. The results that came up made her eyes widen. "Mom, you need to see this." Carmen struggled out of her chair and came to peer over Emma's shoulder at the screen. The first result was a Forbes article titled "The Youngest Self-Made Billionaire in Tech." The photo showed David Sterling, clean-shaven and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline. Billionaire? Carmen whispered. With a B? Emma clicked on the article and began reading aloud. David Sterling, 34, built Sterling Enterprises from the ground up, transforming a small software startup into a global technology empire worth over $3 billion. Known for his innovative approach to business and his intense privacy, Sterling rarely gives interviews and is considered one of the most eligible bachelors in America. $3 billion, Carmen repeated, sinking into the chair next to Emma. Mija, what did you get yourself into? Emma continued reading. Sterling's personal life has been the subject of much speculation, particularly following his broken engagement to socialite Victoria Ashford 3 years ago. Sources close to the couple cited irreconcilable differences, though rumors persist about financial motivations behind the relationship. Broken engagement, Emma murmured, thinking about David's comment about being lied to and betrayed. That explains some things. She clicked through several more articles, building a picture of David Sterling that was both impressive and troubling. Business magazines praised his genius and innovation. Society pages speculated about his love life and reclusiveness. Financial publications analyzed his company's stock performance and acquisition strategies. But what struck Emma most were the photos. In every single one, David looked polished and composed, but there was something cold in his eyes, something guarded. He looked nothing like the man who had stood in the parking lot that afternoon, showing genuine vulnerability when he apologized. Look at this, Emma said, clicking on a photo gallery from a charity gala. This was taken just 6 months ago. The photo showed David in a tuxedo, standing next to a stunning blonde woman in a designer gown. They looked like they belonged together, both beautiful, both wealthy, both perfectly groomed. But even in what should have been a happy moment, David's smile looked forced. He doesn't look happy, Carmen observed. For someone with everything, he doesn't look happy at all. Emma found herself studying David's face in the photo, comparing it to the man she'd met that afternoon. The David in the photo was wearing a mask. She could see that now. The David in the parking lot had been raw, real, human. Maybe that's why he was testing people, Emma said quietly. Maybe he's trying to find something real in a world where everyone wants something from him. And maybe, Carmen said, you showed him exactly what he was looking for. Emma's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Emma? It's David. David Sterling. Emma's heart started beating faster. Carmen raised her eyebrows, clearly able to hear the deep voice through the phone speaker. How did you get my number? I asked around at the restaurant. I hope that's okay. Asked around? They gave you my personal information? There was a pause. I may have implied I was calling about a job opportunity, which, to be fair, I am. Despite everything, Emma felt her lips twitch with amusement. That's a pretty loose interpretation of the truth. I'm learning that truth is more complicated than I thought. David's voice was softer now, more like it had been in the parking lot. Can we talk? In person? Emma looked at her mother, who was listening shamelessly to every word. Carmen nodded encouragingly. I don't know, Emma said. This whole situation is so bizarre. You lied about who you were, I lost my job, and now you're calling me like we're old friends. I don't even know how to process any of this. I know, and I'm sorry. But Emma, what you did today, no one has done anything like that for me in years, maybe ever, and I can't stop thinking about it. What I did was give leftovers to someone I thought was hungry. It wasn't some grand gesture. That's exactly why it matters. David's voice was intense now. You didn't think about it, you just did it. Because it was right. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Emma found herself thinking about the photos she'd just seen. David surrounded by people who looked perfect and polished and completely artificial. Your world sounds lonely, she said quietly. The admission seemed to surprise them both. David was quiet for a long moment. It is, he said finally. Very lonely. Emma felt something shift inside her, a softening she hadn't expected. What do you want from me, David? Honestly, I'm not sure yet. But I know I want to see you again. I know I want to make up for costing you your job. And I know I want to understand how someone can be so genuinely good in a world that usually punishes goodness. Goodness wasn't punished today. Stupidity was. But even as Emma said it, she knew it wasn't true. She didn't regret what she'd done, and she wouldn't change it if she could do it over. "Have dinner with me," David said. "Let me explain everything. Let me apologize properly, and let me offer you something better than a job waiting tables." Emma looked at her mother again. Carmen made a go-on gesture with her hands. "I don't want charity," Emma said. "I don't want to be your project or your good deed for the day. That's not what this is. Emma, I've been looking for someone like you for 3 years. Someone real, someone who isn't interested in my money or my status, someone who would be kind to a stranger just because it's the right thing to do. How do you know I'm not interested in your money? Maybe I looked you up online and now I'm playing hard to get because I know how much you're worth." David laughed, and the sound was so warm and genuine that Emma felt her defenses slipping. "Did you look me up?" "Yes," Emma admitted. And I'm even more confused than I was before. The man in those photos looks nothing like the man I met today. The man in those photos is the mask I wear to survive in a world where everyone wants something from me. The man you met today. That's who I am when I don't have to pretend." Emma felt her resistance crumbling. Against her better judgment, she was curious. More than curious. "One dinner," she said finally, "but somewhere public. And I'm driving myself." "Of course. Do you know Giuseppe's on 5th Street? Emma almost laughed. Giuseppe's was the kind of restaurant where appetizers cost more than she usually spent on groceries for a week. "I'm not exactly dressed for Giuseppe's. You're dressed perfectly." "Emma, you could wear a paper bag and be the most beautiful woman in the room." The compliment caught her off guard, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's a pretty line, Mr. Sterling." "It's also true. 7 o'clock?" Emma looked at the clock on her laptop. It was already 5:30. "I need to shower and change." "Take your time, I'll wait." After Emma hung up, Carmen studied her daughter's face with the knowing look of a mother who had raised a girl to womanhood. "You like him?" Carmen said. It wasn't a question. "Mom, I just met him. And he lied to me. And he's a billionaire who apparently tests people for fun." "None of that answers my question." Emma sighed, knowing her mother could read her like an open book. There was something about him. When he dropped the act, when he was just real, he seemed lonely and hurt and genuine. "And attracted to you." "Mom, what?" I heard his voice through the phone. "That man is interested, Mika, very interested." Emma stood up and headed toward her bedroom. "It doesn't matter. We're from completely different worlds. This is probably just curiosity on his part, and I need a job, not a complication." "Sometimes," Carmen called after her, "the best things in life start as complications." As Emma stood in her small bedroom, looking at her limited wardrobe options, she couldn't shake the feeling that her mother was right. Everything about David Sterling was complicated. His wealth, his deception, his obvious emotional baggage, and most dangerously, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious he'd been searching for his whole life. She settled on her one good dress, a simple black sheath she'd bought for job interviews, and took a quick shower. As she dried her hair, she found herself thinking about David's comment about looking for someone real. What did that mean exactly? And why did she get the feeling that whatever test he'd been conducting that afternoon, she'd passed in ways that surprised them both? By the time Emma was ready to leave, she'd managed to convince herself that this was just dinner with a potential employer. Nothing more, nothing less. She was curious about his offer. She needed work, and she deserved an explanation for the chaos he'd caused in her life. But as she kissed her mother goodbye and headed for her car, Emma couldn't ignore the flutter of excitement in her stomach or the way her heart rate picked up when she thought about seeing David Sterling again, not the polished CEO from the photos, but the man who had stood in a parking lot and called her rare. Whatever this dinner led to, Emma had the feeling her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Giuseppe's was exactly as intimidating as Emma had expected: soft lighting, linen tablecloths, and waiters who moved with the kind of practiced elegance that came from years of serving the wealthy and powerful. Emma paused in the entryway, suddenly very aware of her simple dress and discount store shoes. "May I help you?" The hostess looked Emma up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I'm meeting someone. David Sterling?" The hostess's entire demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, Mr. Sterling is waiting for you. Right this way, please." Emma followed her through the dining room, trying not to stare at the other patrons. This was clearly the kind of place where politicians made deals and CEOs conducted business over wine that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. David was seated at a corner table, and Emma's breath caught when she saw him. Gone was any trace of the disheveled street performer from that afternoon. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair styled and his face clean-shaven. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO she'd read about online. But when he stood to greet her, his eyes were the same, intelligent, guarded, but with that hint of vulnerability she'd glimpsed in the parking lot. "Emma, you look beautiful." "You look..." Emma paused, taking in his transformation. "Very different." David's smile was rueful. "I imagine so. Thank you for coming." The hostess pulled out Emma's chair with exaggerated politeness, clearly impressed by the company Emma was keeping. Once she'd left, an awkward silence settled over the table. "I ordered wine," David said, gesturing to a bottle that was already breathing on the table. "I hope that's okay." Emma nodded, though she had no idea how to navigate the etiquette of a dinner that probably cost more than she made in a month. A waiter appeared immediately to pour the wine, and Emma took a generous sip for courage. "So," she said, when they were alone again, "David Sterling, billionaire. I have to admit, that wasn't what I was expecting when I woke up this morning." "I imagine not." David's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "I want to explain about today, about why I did what I did." "I'm listening." David was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. 3 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Victoria Ashford. Beautiful, intelligent, from one of the oldest society families in the city. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Emma remembered the photo she'd seen online, the stunning blonde who'd looked like she belonged in David's world. What happened? I discovered that she'd been having an affair with my business partner for over a year, but that wasn't the worst part. David's jaw tightened. The worst part was finding out that the entire relationship had been planned. They'd researched me, figured out exactly what kind of woman I'd be attracted to, and Victoria had molded herself into that person. Every shared interest, every laugh, every moment I thought was genuine. It was all an act designed to get access to my money. Emma felt a chill run through her. That's horrible. It was a very expensive lesson in human nature. David's voice was bitter. After that, I started noticing how differently people treated me when they knew who I was versus when they didn't. The difference was eye-opening. "So you decided to test people." I started small, pretending to be a normal businessman instead of a CEO, seeing how people treated me. Then I tried being a janitor in my own building, watching how my own employees behaved when they thought no one important was watching. David met Emma's eyes. "What I found was that most people are willing to step on others when they think it won't matter, and willing to do almost anything when they think it will benefit them." Emma thought about her own experiences with entitled customers, with managers who treated her like she was disposable, with people who acted like service workers were invisible. "That's not exactly shocking," she said. "The world can be pretty ugly." "Yes, but I needed to know if kindness still existed anywhere. Real kindness, not the performative kind that comes with expectations." David leaned forward. "So I started conducting these experiments, testing how people would treat someone they thought had nothing to offer them. And today I was going to give up. After 3 years of testing hundreds of people, I'd found exactly 3 who showed genuine kindness to a stranger with no ulterior motive. I was ready to accept that real goodness was essentially extinct." Emma felt something twist in her chest. "What changed your mind?" David's eyes softened. "You did. Emma, in 3 years of testing, no one has ever sacrificed something important to help me. No one has ever put themselves at risk for a stranger. Most people might drop $1 in my case or offer a kind word, but you gave me food that could have fed you. You risked your job for someone you'd never met." "I didn't think..." "Exactly. You didn't think about what it might cost you or what you might get in return. You just acted on pure instinct to help someone. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is?" Emma took another sip of wine, uncomfortable with the intensity in David's voice. "It's not extraordinary, it's just human. In my experience, it's anything but." The waiter appeared to take their orders, and Emma was grateful for the interruption. She chose the least expensive item she could find, while David ordered without looking at prices, a reminder of just how different their worlds were. When they were alone again, Emma decided to ask the question that had been bothering her since she'd looked him up online. "If you're worth $3 billion, why do you care so much about finding genuine people? Can't you just, I don't know, enjoy your money and forget about everyone else?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Have you ever been truly lonely, Emma? Not just alone, but surrounded by people who only want to be near you because of what you can give them?" Emma thought about her years of working in service, of being invisible to most of the people she served. But that wasn't the same thing. She had her mother, she had real friendships, she had people who cared about her for who she was. "No," she said honestly, "I haven't. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I haven't had a real conversation with someone in years. Everyone wants something from me. Business deals, investments, donations, connections. Everyone has an angle." David's voice was quiet but intense. "Do you know what it's like to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared, not because you're poor or invisible, but because you're only valuable for what you can provide?" Emma felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. "That sounds awful." "It is, and that's why what you did today mattered so much. For just a moment, someone saw me as a human being who might need help, not as a resource to be exploited." Their appetizers arrived, and Emma found herself studying David's face as he talked. The polished exterior was still there, but she could see cracks in the facade. The man underneath was wounded, guarded, desperately searching for something he wasn't sure existed. "So what happens now?" Emma asked. "You've found your genuine person. What exactly are you looking for from me?" David hesitated. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I know I want to see you again. I know I want to make up for costing you your job. And I know I want to find out if what I felt today was real." "What you felt?" "When you looked at me, not at my clothes or my circumstances, but at me, I felt something I haven't felt in years, like I was actually being seen." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something about the way David was looking at her, an intensity that made her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to stay grounded. "David, I appreciate the honesty, but we need to be realistic here. You're a billionaire CEO, and I'm an unemployed waitress. Even if there's some kind of attraction here, we're from completely different worlds." "Are we?" David leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about yourself, Emma. Really tell me. What do you want out of life?" The question caught her off guard. "What do I want? Everyone wants something. What's your dream, your goal, the thing that drives you?" Emma was quiet for a moment, surprised by how hard the question was to answer. For so long her goals had been immediate and practical: pay rent, buy groceries, keep her mother's medication current. "I want to finish school," she said finally. "I want to get my degree and maybe start my own business someday. Something that helps people, not just makes money." "What kind of business?" "I don't know exactly. Something in social work maybe, or non-profit management. Something that matters." Emma felt foolish, admitting her dreams to someone who had already achieved so much. "I know it sounds naive." "It doesn't sound naive at all. It sounds like you want to make a difference." David's voice was warm. "What's stopping you?" Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Money, time, reality. I work full-time just to survive. I can only afford to take one class at a time at community college. At this rate, I'll be 40 before I finish my bachelor's degree. What if money weren't an obstacle? It's always an obstacle for people like me. What if it weren't?" David's eyes were intense again. "What if you could go to school full-time, focus entirely on your studies, not worry about rent or bills, or whether you could afford textbooks?" Emma stared at him. "Are you offering to pay for my education?" "I'm asking a hypothetical question." "No, you're not." Emma set down her fork. "You're thinking about throwing money at whatever problems I have, and I already told you I don't want charity." It wouldn't be charity, it would be an investment. In what? In someone who might be able to show me that genuine goodness still exists in the world. Emma felt her heart start to race. David, you can't just decide to remake someone's life because they were nice to you one time. Why not? Because it's crazy, because we just met, because you don't know anything about me. I know that you sacrificed your job to feed someone you thought was hungry. I know that you're taking care of your sick mother. I know that you're working toward goals that matter to you despite incredible obstacles. David's voice was steady, certain. I know that in a world full of people who want to take from me, you're someone who gives. Emma felt overwhelmed by the intensity of his attention, by the implications of what he seemed to be suggesting. This is too much, too fast. I need time to think. Of course. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. Then what are you asking? David smiled, and for the first time since they'd sat down, he looked genuinely relaxed. I'm asking you to let me take you to lunch tomorrow, somewhere less intimidating than this, somewhere we can talk like normal people. Normal people? You know what I mean. Emma did know what he meant. Despite the expensive restaurant and the designer suit, there had been moments during their conversation when David had seemed like just a man talking to a woman he was interested in. Not a billionaire and a waitress, just David and Emma. I need to find another job, Emma said. I can't afford to take time off to have lunch with mysterious billionaires. What if I told you I had a job offer for you? What kind of job offer? David grinned. You'll have to have lunch with me to find out. Despite everything, the strangeness of the situation, the overwhelming difference in their circumstances, the voice in her head warning her that this was all too good to be true, Emma found herself smiling back. You're very manipulative, Mr. Sterling. I prefer to think of myself as persuasive. Is there a difference? Manipulation is about getting what you want regardless of what's best for the other person. Persuasion is about showing someone why what you want might be good for both of you. Emma considered this. And which one is this? I guess you'll have to decide for yourself. The waiter appeared with their entrees, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Favorite books, movies, places they'd traveled or wanted to travel. Emma found herself relaxing despite her better judgment. When David wasn't being intense and mysterious, he was actually easy to talk to, funny even. Intelligent in a way that challenged rather than intimidated her. But underneath the pleasant dinner conversation, Emma was acutely aware of the undercurrent of attraction between them. The way David's eyes lingered on her face when she talked, the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, the way the air seemed to crackle with possibility whenever their conversation turned personal. By the time they finished dinner, Emma's mind was spinning with questions she couldn't answer. Was David Sterling genuine? Or was this all just a more sophisticated version of the games he'd admitted to playing? Was she being smart and cautious, or was she letting fear keep her from something extraordinary? And most dangerously, what was she going to do about the undeniable fact that she was attracted to a man whose life was so far removed from hers that they might as well be from different planets? Let me drive you home, David said as they prepared to leave. I have my car. Then let me follow you. Make sure you get home safely. Emma wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. Not possessive or controlling, just concerned. When was the last time someone had been concerned about her safety? Okay, she said softly. David signaled for the check, and Emma was grateful she couldn't see the total. As they walked toward the restaurant's exit, she was hyper-aware of his presence beside her. The way he moved with confidence and grace, the subtle scent of his cologne, the protective way he positioned himself slightly in front of her as they navigated through the crowded dining room. In the parking lot, David walked her to her car, an ancient Honda Civic that looked even more decrepit next to his sleek black Mercedes. Emma, he said as she unlocked her door, whatever you decide about lunch tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you today changed something for me. You reminded me that good people still exist, and that's a gift I can never repay. Emma looked up at him, struck by the sincerity in his voice. You don't need to repay kindness, David. That's the whole point of kindness. David stepped closer, close enough that Emma could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and her heart hammered against her ribs. Instead, he reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're extraordinary, Emma Rodriguez. I hope you know that." The simple touch sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "I'm really not." "Yes," David said quietly. "You really are." He stepped back, and Emma got into her car on unsteady legs. As she drove home, she could see David's Mercedes in her rearview mirror, following at a respectful distance. When she pulled into her apartment complex, he waited until she was safely inside the building before driving away. Emma climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind reeling. In the space of 12 hours, her life had been turned completely upside down. She'd lost her job, met a billionaire, had the most intense dinner of her life, and somehow found herself seriously considering having lunch with a man who was everything she'd never thought she wanted. As she quietly let herself into the apartment, she found her mother waiting up in the living room. "Well?" Carmen asked. "How was dinner with Prince Charming?" Emma sank onto the couch beside her mother, pulling off her shoes with a sigh. "Complicated. The best ones usually are," Carmen said wisely. "Tell me everything." And as Emma recounted the evening's events, she couldn't shake the feeling that David Sterling was going to change her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. Emma spent the next morning staring at her phone, debating whether to text David about lunch. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of their dinner, every word he'd said, every look that had passed between them. By 11 o'clock, she'd typed and deleted at least 15 different messages. Her internal debate was interrupted by a knock at the door. Emma frowned, not expecting anyone, and peered through the peephole. A woman in an expensive suit stood in the hallway, perfectly groomed and holding what appeared to be legal documents. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates. I represent Sterling Enterprises." Emma's heart sank. Had David changed his mind? Was this some kind of legal action related to yesterday's incident? "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What is this about?" "May I come in? This concerns your recent interaction with Mr. David Sterling." Emma reluctantly opened the door, and Jennifer Walsh swept into the small apartment with the confidence of someone used to intimidating people. She looked around the modest living space with barely concealed disdain. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm here to discuss a settlement regarding yesterday's incident at Bella's Bistro." "Settlement?" Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "Mr. Sterling's board of directors is concerned about potential liability issues stemming from his unconventional behavior. We're prepared to offer you a substantial sum in exchange for your signature on this non-disclosure agreement." Emma stared at the papers, her mind reeling. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying?" "We're saying that Mr. Sterling's activities yesterday put the company at risk. His decision to misrepresent himself, combined with the resulting incident that cost you your employment, could be viewed as corporate negligence if brought to court." "I never said anything about taking anyone to court." Jennifer's